The first time I heard this story, I was in London, Ontario in Canada. And I was at a conference, and a professor from a university in New York got up and he said, I teach the Ricardo theory of rent to my students, but I don't know how to express that for the person in the street. Can any of you help me? And it was an open mic session, anyone could get up. And a very elderly gentleman called Everett Gross struggled with 2 walking sticks to the rostrum. And he stood up and he said, I come from a small town in the United States. And I describe to people what economic rent is without mentioning Ricardo, without even mentioning economics or rent. And the story I tell them is this. A gentleman came to our town who wanted to build a factory. And he went to the realtor, the estate agent, and described to her exactly what size piece of land he needed for his new factory. And she said, oh, you're in luck. I've got a piece of land like that, exactly that size, on my books. Let's get in my car and we'll drive out to look at the site. So they got in the car and they drove out of town, along a freeway, then off the freeway onto a local road, then down a country lane, and then onto a dirt track. And after about 10 minutes on the dirt track, they stopped and they walked for about 10 minutes across marshy land and bogs and bushes, and eventually they got to the field. And she said, this field is exactly the size you want for your factory, and it's $10,000. He looked around. He said, are there any other ways of entering this field? Is there another road, another highway, the other side of the field? She said, no, that's the only access point. He said, are there any houses around here? She said, no, there's no houses nearby. Is there any transport, any buses or trains? She said, no, not within miles of here. She said, you're not looking very happy. He said, well, I'm not. I've got to build a factory. He said, I've got to bring in the materials to build the factory. I've got to bring in the machinery that I'm going to put inside the factory. My workers have got to come here every day. I even run a factory shop at the gate, and my customers have to get to the factory. I don't think this site is very suitable. She said, look, don't worry. I have another site on my books. Let's go and have a look at that. So they got back into the car and they drove back towards the centre of town, and in the suburbs they stopped. And they got out the car and she pointed to the second site. And she says, this is exactly the same size as the first site that I showed you. And as you can see, it's got a lovely, well-made up road. It's got good street lighting. It's got a railway station just by the site. There's buses up and down the road that go all over the state. The trains go all over the country. Just behind us, there's a big housing estate with half the houses for rent and half for sale. There's a huge hospital with doctors of international repute. And the local school is so good that people move into the area and will pay $80,000 extra for a house in the catchment area of the school because the headmistress runs such an excellent school. On this side of town, crime is very low. The police are up and down all the time. The site itself has got electricity, gas, it's got cable, it's got water, sewerage, all the utilities that you would require for your factory. She says the fire brigade, the rescue truck service is so good, they even come before the fire has started. He says, this is more like it. This is exactly what I want. This is the place for me to build my factory. And with that, he pulls out his checkbook and he starts to write a check for $10,000. And she says, hey, hold on a minute. This site is not $10,000. Not $10,000, he said, but you told me it was exactly the same size as the first site you showed me. It is the same size, she says. But think about it. You've got all these wonderful services, all the utilities, the good policing, the well-made-up road, you've got the transport, you've got the accommodation for people who will work at your factory, you've got the good services with education and health. So he said, well, how much is this site? She says, it's $110,000. 110, he says, and he thought about it. And then he said, yeah, he said, it is worth 110,000 to me. I'll pay you 110,000. I'll pay $110,000. But to whom do I make the cheque out to? Is it to the utility companies? Is it to the local councils for the streets? Is it the bus company? Is it the railway company? Is it the housing association, the school board, the health authority? To whom should I pay this money? She said, you don't pay any of those. You pay it to a gentleman who lives in Florida. And he owns the site, and so you pay the $110,000 to him. He really worried about that, and he scratched his head. And then a smile came across his lips, and he said, I've got it. He keeps the 10,000, and he gives 100,000 to all these agencies. She said, no. He's going to retire, and your cheque is going to be his retirement pot, his pension. So how do you pay for all these wonderful services? Well, we wait until you built your factory, and then we charge you a property tax on the building. And when you start employing people, we charge you national insurance or income tax on the staff that you employ. And when you sell your goods, we charge you a general sales tax or VAT on all the goods that you sell. But that's not fair, he says. I'm paying twice for the facilities on this site. I'm paying once to the gentleman who's selling me the land, and then you're asking me to pay again to all these agencies through the tax. That's not fair. Why should I pay twice? And just think about it. Whether we rent our home, or we rent our business premises, or we own our home and we have a mortgage to the bank, or our business premises on a business loan, we are paying twice. We pay once for the use of the land to a private landowner, and then secondly, we pay taxes for all the services that give that land its initial value. It can't be right. It's time we stop paying twice.